What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Lunar Observer, the unscheduled podcast where I and a friend or two gather around to talk about Insomniac games, the creators of Spyro, Ratchet, Resistance, and Resistance 2. I am Kebabs, and joining me again is Division 10.
Hey everybody, it's Division 10. Long time no see.
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, we're back in our respective continents after the escapades of PSX.
Darn you, Pacific Ocean!
Yeah, Pacific Ocean and the entire United States continent.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, land masses.
Well, yeah, since PSX, not much has really been happening, although there were two things worth noting that we'll get into. The main one is the big Game Informer blowout of Edge of Nowhere that nobody really seems to be talking about.
I think part of it is that right now it's still locked behind a paywall. If you're not a Game Informer subscriber, you can't access this information yet. So we're going to talk about both of us have subscriptions, and we got a chance to read through it day one, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
we're not going
some pretty
to,
awesome screenshots.
Yeah, we're not going to recite the article. We're just going to discuss the points that the article has. We don't want to sort of
undermine.
Yeah, we don't want to
Game
undermine
Informer.
the point of it being exclusive, because then that would be bad.
Yeah, but on that note, if you want to read the article in full, it's 9 pages of Game Informer. It is the largest single article in the issue.
Yeah.
You can get a subscription one of two ways. You can either buy Game Informer physically as a magazine that they send to your house in the United States, or anywhere in the world, you can actually buy a digital subscription. That's way one. Way two is if you're in the United States and you are a GameStop, I believe it's called a gold member or their equivalent, their sort of like yearly membership club, you automatically get Game Informer monthly, either physically or digitally as part of that. So if you are a GameStop subscriber, you already have this, so go check it out.
All right, so I guess we'll just jump straight into the news. The first item on the news is actually quite sad. It's sort of the end of an era for not an insignificant game for Insomniac, because Outernauts' second iteration on iOS and Android is now heading for a close. In their blogcast, Insomniac announced that all in-app purchases have been removed from the game, and Star Gems are now earned at a dramatically higher rate, as effective of the 10th of December, when the blog post was written. It's the 22nd now. This will be followed by the service being shut down on February 1st, 2016, and the game pulled from the Apple and Android stores. The game will therefore be completely unplayable, as it requires a server connection when you start it.
Yeah, which means that even if you have the game on your phone, the minute you try to start it up, it just won't let you play because it's online only.
Yeah, this is why always online is a bad thing, in my opinion.
Well, it is a free-to-play game, so for the time being, if you didn't sink any money into it, what did you lose? Other than, I mean, the enjoyment you got out of playing the game. From everybody I've heard who plays it, they've really enjoyed it.
And that's
I
my
missed
point.
the bandwagon when it was on Facebook, but
Yeah, and that's my point, because this is basically going to be the first Insomniac game that, once this goes into effect, you will never be able to play the game again. You can still play Disruptor on emulators.
yeah, you can, because there's emulators, and can they even emulate the online component like Left 4 Dead 2 can?
I have no idea, but I don't think Outernauts is a popular enough game for people to be emulating it. And yeah, that's what I mean about always online being a negative thing, because one day this is going to happen to Titanfall and Evolve, and those are, not unremarkable games that people might want to play again out of curiosity, except they won't be able to when they shut down the servers. It'll just be a fancy title screen that costs you $30.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are a few games that have surprisingly survived this. The original Team Fortress is no longer supported by Valve, yet you can actually still play it online, and there's dedicated people who are keeping servers alive.
Yeah.
So if and only if a game is popular enough will you see this happen with online only titles. But if it's a middle of the road game, if it's a game that's good enough that people enjoyed but just wasn't good enough, this is going to become more and more of a problem in the future as more and more games are online only.
Yeah. So yeah, I personally preferred the Facebook version of Outernauts better. I wasn't really that big of a fan of the whole direction that the mobile game took, which is all about the breeding and battling. I did like the more exploratory. Well, people keep comparing it, but it's Pokemon in space basically, and that is not a bad thing because that is a brilliant concept, and I much preferred that over, oh, you're fighting 3 enemies again, and this time they're slightly harder. Woohoo!
Yeah, which makes me think. I don't know if you've heard about Pokemon Go, which is basically what Outernauts is on mobile. How they're going to be able to keep that going for any given period of time, other than the license name, which Outernauts didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon at least has the fact that, well, it's freaking Pokemon, so it will probably last a lot longer after the release, and it also has augmented reality as well, so there's that.
Yeah. Either way, we tip your hats to you, Outernauts, and if you want to get into it now, there's no more IAP for the rest of the game. You've got a month and a half to give it a shot.
Yeah, reap the benefits and whatnot. I really like the title screen in terms of the music. I mean,
okay, I was like, I was giggling because that's unfortunately what it's going to end up becoming once this game is over.
that's assuming that the server check is after the title screen.
After the title,
which I don't think
usually,
it is.
No, usually they're before. Usually it's immediately upon startup.
Yeah.
So, Outernauts players, I'm sure you guys are already well aware of this, but if you're on the fence, give it a try. You've got a month.
Yeah, this is well, those who remember back to episode 9 or 8, I believe it was, when we first came back with Division 10, we talked about how this happened for the Resistance trilogy as well.
Yeah, but Resistance does have an offline single-player mode, does it not?
Yeah, it does. You can still play the campaign. However, the Resistance 2 does actually have online-specific trophies, so if you don't have it yet, it is now impossible to get the Platinum on Resistance 2.
Yeah, and that sucks, and unfortunately, that's just going to be something that we're going to see more of in the future with more online-only games.
Yeah, good thing Ratchet and Clank is more established as a single-player game.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately with online-only games, the way that I see it is you're paying for an experience, not to own something. And if you treat it that way, that's probably going to be the way that you earn the most enjoyment out of it. In the same way that, like, yeah, you can own a movie on DVD, but if you're going to see a movie in theaters, you're not owning the theater and you're not owning the film itself. You're paying for an experience that when it's over, it's over.
Yeah. The difference, of course, is that when you're in a movie theater, you get access to a movie watching setup that is pretty expensive to replicate at home.
This is true.
Yeah.
So until these kinds of games can offer something that unique, I tend to avoid them unless it's something I really, really enjoy and I know what I'm getting into.
And that's why I don't agree with games like Evolve and Titanfall and Rainbow Six Siege and Star Wars Battlefront, where they sell you... They effectively sell you just the multiplayer, which is half the game, and yet they still charge you $60 for it. But that's a subject for a different podcast, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we should get into that here, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. Now, the next news item isn't really news, but I thought it was interesting, and it's technically rather old. Animator 16 on the Insomniac forums posted a link to a Ratchet & Clank 1 post-mortem written by Ted Price on Gamasutra back in 2003. The post-mortem details what specifically is meant by the engine technology that Insomniac used for the PS2 titles. This is the engine tech and code that they borrowed from Naughty Dog to help get their feet up onto the ground after they swiftly cancelled Girl with a Stick and needed to come up with a new game really quickly. The techniques specifically involve being able to smoothly transition between different levels of detail depending on how far away the object is. So, for example, the place where I see this the most is in Metropolis, where you have the bridge that heads to the train station, and you can see the next building as you get closer that the textures sort of get waves as they get higher and higher resolution. That's the kind of technology that they were using. And it is important because it's the primary reason why Ratchet & Clank was able to have such large and detailed vistas. Insomniac were also actually notable in the PS1 era for Spyro's own vistas, which were achieved by vector shading and the fading in of textures when you got closer to objects.
So, kebabs, in a completely non-contrived way, what is vector shading?
I put that in because I figured that you wouldn't know what it was.
I actually do, but I think it would be good for some of our audience members to get a little bit more info so they're not pulling up Wikipedia at the same time.
Yeah. Well, as far as I understand it, vector shading is where, a polygon is made up of vector points, and lines are drawn between them, which are called arcs. And then filling in those arcs will be a surface, and that's what makes a polygon. Vector shading is where you assign a color associated to a certain vector point. This is actually how Insomniac achieved Spyro's backgrounds and why they look angular and gradienty. Those are polygons that are being drawn in the background.
Yeah, as I've mentioned before, I do a lot of data analysis, and that's all calculus, which is exactly what this is. So anybody who says that calc, when you're studying in high school and college, isn't important, it's super important for video game design.
Yeah, that was...
but getting back,
Sorry, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, so that's the major news stuff. But there was one more thing that we actually just were given, again by Animator 16, about, 10-15 minutes ago, that I think we should quickly touch on?
Yeah, he, according to my clock, he posted it about 45 minutes ago as of this... wait, hold on, let me refresh the page. He... as of, not of this recording, but as of this moment in the recording, he posted a link about 45 minutes ago. And basically it's a YouTube video on Double Fine Prod, which is Ratchet & Clank with Ted Price, which is where Ted Price and Tim Schafer play through Ratchet & Clank 1. And they've got lots of cool intros, such as how to pronounce Kaizel correctly.
It apparently is actually Kaizel. Quark pronounced it wrong in the PS4 game, which begs me to differ. Was that intentional, or was that a holdover from the movie mispronouncing the word?
Well, I think it's possible that it's pronounced Kizel in the movie verse and Kaizel in the original video game verse.
Thank you, Big Al. That was actually... That wasn't half bad. I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty impressed.
Okay, I'll do my better one.
Yeah, your Clank is pretty good.
Yeah, okay. And there was a previous edition of this video. It's season 2 of Dev's Play, and episode 1 was Spyro the Dragon.
Yeah, so if you want, they're on YouTube. You can go check them out, and it's Tim Schafer sitting down with various other developers that he knows and playing the games that they made with them. So Ted Price is on there twice, and it's a lot of different stuff. I think there's an episode on Grim Fandango. I think there's a Maniac Mansion one. So go check it out. It's a lot of classic games.
So, that is it for the news. Now, the next segment is all about the Edge of Nowhere article in Game Informer.
Yes, and like we said before, if you want to read the article yourself and check it out, it is January's issue. It came out December.
Shouldn't it be December?
No, they're 1 month ahead. So if you want to check it out, it's January 2016's issue, if you want to look it up by issue number, even though it came out in December.
That's weird. That's like EA levels of logic.
Yeah. So because also keep in mind that the digital recipients have already received the issue. The physical recipients won't receive it till January.
Oh, okay.
If you get it digitally like I do and you do, we get it 2 weeks early.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
So yes, it is January 2016's issue, and it is the VR specific issue.
Yeah.
So why don't we dive right in?
Yeah, I've made a whole bunch of bullet points. I sort of divided them into 2 sections. One is about direct gameplay and sort of features of the game itself, and the other is more sort of behind the scenes stuff.
Now I'd like to start off with, I know it's mentioned a little further down, but maybe we should touch on this first because it's so important. The way that the camera works in this game.
Yes, it's effectively on rails in a style that is reminiscent of All for One and Crash Bandicoot, actually.
Yeah, where what you're doing when you move your head isn't necessarily moving the camera so much as moving the aiming reticule of your weapons that you eventually get.
Well,
what this means is that someone like myself, who's visually impaired, who normally can't handle VR, I might actually be able to play this game without nausea.
I thought you can't even see VR.
I can see VR, one eye at a time.
Oh.
It just makes me very, very sick.
Okay. Well, yeah, how it is described in the article is that the camera is, imagine that the camera is on a tripod that is on a track. The track moves as you move the character through the level. You can't control the camera's position on the track, but you can control sort of its tilt and the direction it points sitting on top of the tripod.
So, I don't know if any of you have ever seen behind the movies. I think Mad Max Fury Road is a good example just because there's so much movement. But if you've ever seen those cameras on rails, this is literally what they're mimicking.
Yeah. As I said, it's like All for One, except you can point the camera in any direction.
Mm-hmm. So I thought we should cover that first, even though that's a little further down on your bullet points, just because I think that's so important, especially considering how on the fence a lot of people are, especially with VR virtual reality video games and nausea.
Yeah, it is. It's Insomniac's solution to the problem, and it's a unique solution because that makes Edge of Nowhere one of the few VR games coming out that is actually in third person. Everyone else just goes, oh, right, we'll just make it first person.
Yeah. Now, some games that make sense for, like, say, Minecraft or Portal, where you're already playing in first person. But I think the VR solution for most people who are designing games for VR is it must be in first person. And Insomniac turned around and said, no, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Which I was like, well, yeah, of course, it doesn't have to be in first person. First person is obviously the first place you go to because, you know, you're controlling it with your head, so make the camera the head of the character you're playing as. But yeah.
But what's interesting, though, is that they might actually be using the fact that the camera isn't the main character as that camera that you are playing might actually be a character in and of itself. The article mentions an observer who looms over every moment unseen.
Yeah, not the Lunar Observer.
So is that the monster? No, not the Lunar Observer. So is this the monsters that's going to be in the game? And we'll touch upon that in a little bit.
Yeah,
or is this actually you, the camera?
Yeah, it isn't as explicitly stated, but when the article talked about the observer who looms over every moment unseen, I'm like, well, a big twist would be that that is actually not you, but sort of the camera.
Yeah, that the camera itself is a character. And given that this is a very Lovecraftian-inspired story set in an ice wilderness, it wouldn't surprise me that the camera itself is a monster.
Yeah. Or if you want to take it further, that the player is depicted as the monster. Sort of like a twist similar to, what was it, Braid, where it turns out that the main character is actually a creepy stalker.
Yeah, it's called Tomato Surprise or Tomato in the Mirror. I think at this point it was his sled kind of spoiler. You're okay, Kebabs.
Yeah, I am your father's sled.
No, The Force Awakens spoilers yet, Kebabs. I haven't seen it.
I haven't either. I probably will have by the time I get around to publishing this.
Yeah, same here. I plan to watch it by the end of this weekend.
Yeah, one of the other bullet points I mentioned is ice climbing traversal is a feature of the gameplay. So you probably use ice hooks. I know that in the opening level, you're sort of following the trail of the previous expedition. We'll get into the story in a moment, but you use things like you climb up ropes, balance across ladders, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the game seems to be a combination again of platforming and weapon usage, with a lot of makeshift weapons.
Yeah, we'll jump right into the plot. The game is set in December of 1932 after a team of scientists and seamen, no joke there, leave for Antarctica,
none.
captained by Simon Edwards. After a week of no radio contact, Victor Howard charters a plane to mount a rescue. He lands in the middle of madness. Howard's girlfriend, Ava Thorne, is among the scientists. Oh, help me, please!
That is actually that alone is kind of weird for me. This is 1930s, and there's a prominent female scientist. As awesome as that is, that was not that common back then.
Yeah. And the general trope with those sorts of characters tends to be where if you're doing a historical piece set in something like the 1930s, to have a female character in such a prominent position means that they are a very headstrong and masculine type who fought their way to their position against the prejudices of their gender.
AKA a Marie Curie or something like that.
Yeah.
So we can already just assume a lot about her just by the fact that she's a scientist in the 1930s.
Yeah, she's not going to be a Princess Peach type who needs rescuing. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to get onto the team.
Certainly not. So that's going to be an interesting twist, given that the original Antarctic explorations didn't include any women at all.
Yeah. The game is heavily inspired by the 1931 novella At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. There are lots of Lovecraftian influences on this game. Both Mountains of Madness and Edge of Nowhere feature adventures into the Arctic/Antarctic in the 1930s that result in encounters with otherworldly beings. I also noticed that the same story may have influenced the third act of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves as well, which is where Nate heads into the mountains and encounters these black monsters that seriously freak him out.
Spoilers!
It's not a spoiler.
I'm going to be playing Uncharted over the break, which I finally bought, so thanks.
That's like saying, Nate has a fantastic adventure in the mountains. That's like saying, yeah, okay, there's an X-Wing in Star Wars and they use it to fly in space. Cool.
I'm just pulling your leg.
Yeah. Another Lovecraft inspiration is the shadow over Innsmouth for another part of the game. The story is about the title town of Innsmouth having been taken over by Deep Ones that pose as the villagers, and the title character has to sneak through the town. The story ends with the revelation that the title character is an offspring of the Deep Ones who will slowly transform into one of them.
I wonder if the final game is actually going to go through the entire H.P. Lovecraft anthology, given that we already know 2 major levels are going to be based off of 2 very specific books.
Yeah. That depends on how many Lovecraftian stories there are. Because if there's like 30, then there's no way that the game will be able to pay homage to all of them in a way similar to Mountains of Madness and Shadow over Innsmouth.
This is true, but I think it's going to be more than just these 2 books by what we've seen so far.
I agree, but I disagree on the idea that they pay homage to the entire
pantheon.
Yeah.
No,
go ahead.
No? Oh, okay. But as we mentioned before, there's a lot of traversal, but Insomniac, because VR is so new, doesn't want to basically drop people off in the middle. Like, if any of you have played Tools of Destruction, which I hope most of you have listening to this podcast, you're basically dropped off right in the middle of a war, and you have to run and gun your way through. It assumes you already know how to do a lot of the movements. Insomniac mentioned in the article that they're not going to assume that here, that they're going to slowly introduce you to various elements of the game, venturing through the wastes and using debris as cover against the wind, in order to get you used to both understanding how to navigate in VR, and just the new controls of the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, VR is still a very, very, very new platform, to the point where most of the VR devices have not even been released yet. And as such, you don't want to be dropped into the middle of traditional gameplay in VR, because even traditional players will be like a fish out of water. They won't really be able to do what they normally do. I saw that when I was at PSX and I played the distance demo. The normal gameplay version was very fast with lots of obstacles, but the VR one specifically had fewer obstacles and the car was moving slower.
Yeah, because you have to account for the fact that your camera has shifted and the camera is all around you. And you might think that's a minor thing, but I've actually tried the Oculus Rift before. I have a friend who's a developer, so I've actually used the dev kit, and this is where I discovered how bad my nausea is when playing on these things. It's an entirely different experience.
Yeah, and there's a storytelling aspect to it as well, because if you venture into the fantastic realm of storytelling with, Lovecraftian monsters and that sort of thing, it means nothing if you haven't established the down-to-earth side, so that this is not normal.
Yeah, Lovecraft is very well known at taking the slow creep.
Yeah.
As well as making... The interesting thing about using Lovecraft specifically is that humans don't win in Lovecraft.
No.
So I'm wondering if... No, they never do. That's the entire point. I'm wondering if this is going to go past horror straight into nihilism.
Meaning specifically?
That winning in this game means that you're not winning at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the victory is simply that Victor escapes, rather than he defeats the bad guys.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. Or even that he doesn't even escape. That he's trapped there, but there's some kind of solid resolution to the situation.
Yeah, like he entombed the bad guys. He stopped them from spreading, I guess.
Yeah, Lovecraft is really all about humans don't overcome, they just sort of survive for a while.
Yeah. Now this next point is a little bit long-winded, but bear with me. Later in the game, Victor Howard encounters the town of Providence, a town inspired by the Shadow over Innsmouth's story, and must use stealth to navigate through it. Rather than using HUDs and sensors like in Metal Gear Solid and Splinter Cell, the player must use environmental cues to know when to pass. So, say a guard is distracted and they walk over into a different direction and you slip through the opening. The creatures in the town themselves have masses of tentacles over their limbs and body, and after navigating some ships and the gruesome remains of the town, Victor encounters his girlfriend, Ava Thorne, but then the town vanishes and it's revealed that he was entirely good the whole time and it was just going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of Lovecraft is reality or lack thereof. So it's going to be interesting to see, even though the entire game takes place in Antarctica, since we now know that part of it is inside of his mind, what kinds of dreamscapes we're going to end up walking into.
Yeah, it also means that you can't trust what's being shown to you in terms of what Victor encounters. So let's say that he encounters a member of the expedition. Well, is he really encountering a member, or is he just hallucinating that he is?
Yeah, so it's giving me a very... have you ever played Eternal Darkness?
No.
It's a very old GameCube game where it's very much the same thing. You have a sanity meter, and depending on how sane your character is, things start to change. Monsters may come and attack you, and it turns out there was no monster there at all, so you didn't actually lose any HP. Or someone normal may walk into the room and they actually are a monster, but you're so insane you can't tell the difference. And your character can't tell, so you have to tread very carefully.
Yeah. It also gives, it adds a lot to what can happen in the game, because I'll be honest, the premise of a game set entirely in Antarctica, Arctic and snowy levels tend to be the most boring in terms of environmental design and sort of level design in most video games, because it all looks very samey. You can put them inside a cave and whatnot, but you're still seeing masses and masses of white snow and maybe the occasional rock or two. So by including these hallucinations, we can be taken to very, very different places.
Yeah. The other advantage is, and I will say there are a couple of very loose screenshots. I don't know if this is finished work or not, or if it's in progress, in Game Informer, that, again, if you own a subscription or you get a subscription, you need to look at. They're gorgeous. It's very hard to get ice levels right, and they nailed it.
Yeah. What I noticed...
For the ice areas that we do see, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The ice areas we do see are quite varied.
Yeah, you have... particularly since you're going into the lair of the Lovecraftian monster. So, yeah, I would imagine it's going to be more than just dumb old caves. I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm so sorry.
Oh.
Maybe we'll come back to it.
I remember. One thing that I noticed with the screenshots is that the visuals aren't the most graphically impressive. This is not Ratchet and Clank PS4 or Sunset Overdrive. It's a little bit below that, and yet the graphics seem to... It sounds weird, but they seem to know that they're that quality, so they emphasize more on the art style than other games would.
Yeah, that was something I noticed too, and I'm visually impaired, so I don't normally pick up on subtle differences, but I was like, these graphics look a step back in terms of quality, in terms of graphical fidelity, but they're riding a lot more heavily on this very, very stark art style, and it's working for them. And I think part of that is that the Oculus Rift processing all that information in high def might actually be a hindrance.
Yeah, well, does the Oculus Rift have its own processing, or does it work on the PC?
I actually don't remember how it works, but I do know that the dev kit that I used was pretty low fidelity.
Okay, because we know that with the PlayStation VR that it will have its own box that you attach to the PlayStation 4. Probably so that it can achieve normal console level graphics, you know, rendering it twice and at a high resolution, just so that it can get over that final hurdle. I'm not sure how Oculus is doing it, but I would imagine that it is running off of PC. As such, Insomniac won't know what the technical specifications are of the people who use Oculus to play their game, and if they want to get the widest net possible, they want to sort of they don't want to make the game too technically challenging for the PC. Otherwise, people will buy the game, plug in the Oculus, and all of a sudden it's running at 2 frames per second.
Yeah, because again, it's even if the Oculus is doing some of the processing on its own, ultimately it is a PC game.
Yeah.
Which means that you don't know exactly what PC someone's going to have when they're plugging it in.
Yeah, and Valve tends to be very good at this when they used to make games, with games like Team Fortress and Portal. Not the most technically challenging games, but the art style means that they still look the part.
Yeah, my much older computer could play Portal 2 just fine, and it looked great.
Yeah.
Because they were very, very tight on their art style.
And sort of where they put their detail, again emphasizing the art style, because I hear it on a lot of other podcasts and I totally agree with this notion. The quickest art style to age is games that go for photorealistic visuals, because then in 5 years it'll be old school and you go back to it and you're like, ugh.
Yeah, the game Borderlands was originally in that photorealistic style, and by them changing it to a hyper cel-shaded style, it actually has aged much better. Okami was the same way.
Yeah, Journey as well is another game. A lot of indie games do this because of the fact that, you know, their smaller budgets means they can't go for hyper-realism, so they usually go for cel-shaded or pixelized or very flat color art styles.
And it does work, and I think Edge of Nowhere understands what it is, and it's working with those constraints instead of trying to push against them.
Exactly. I remember the original Sly Cooper was like that as well. The level modeling design was very angular, and because of the fact that I'd imagine that they couldn't get as many polygons out of it as they wanted to, so they're like, okay, we can't get as many polygons into it. Let's go with that.
Yeah. So kudos to the team for working with their constraints.
Now, in the final part of the demo that Game Informer played, Victor is actually armed with flares, petrol bombs, and shotguns. Most of them improvised and thus in limited supply. So, survival horror!
Yep, and harpoons are also mentioned, which you can fire right into the chests of monsters.
Ow.
Ow. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be able to kill these monsters, maybe just subdue them. And I hope it's just subdue.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if, say, if we go back to the hallucination thing, that Victor hallucinates several enemies. He uses up all of his ammo, and then it turns out he was just imagining it. It's like, shit! I just used up all my ammo.
Yeah, but the most interesting thing out of this that Game Informer mentioned is that weapon selection is handled via the Ratchet and Clank Quick Select wheel. It's back.
Yeah, the classic quick select wheel, which it's a fairly common design implementation in video games these days. I've seen it in Grand Theft Auto, and it got me wondering what the first game to use a quick select wheel was, because Ratchet and Clank, for me at least, was my first exposure to that.
Yeah, I mean, the old games I used to play, everything from like Dark Cloud, which is an action RPG, you had to actually go into the menu to swap stuff out.
Yeah.
Ratchet and Clank was the first game I could think of that had a quick select wheel. I don't know if they invented it.
Yeah.
Maybe someone in the comments can tell us if there's an earlier game than 2002 that had one.
Yeah. The quick select wheel, I think, is one of those little hidden gameplay gems, because it means that it feels like a fair chunk of your weapons are always at hand, because if you're going through a menu, say if you imagine the Ratchet and Clank 1 sort of weapon menu, you got the bomb glove and the blaster at the top left corner, but if you want to get to the Rhino, you have to go all the way to the bottom right corner, which is a bit of a journey. But on the in the quick select, your starting point is, metaphorically speaking, the middle of the wheel, and to access any weapon, you just got to move the quick select highlight from the middle to a weapon. So you can have all of these weapons right at your fingertips.
Yeah, it makes the UI easier to handle. It puts less clunkiness between you and the game that you're playing.
Yeah, and it keeps you in the game as well by having it sort of pulled up during gameplay, especially in Going Commando when they brain fart, when the gameplay actually paused outright for you to access it, because normally you would have to press start, then go to weapons, and then shift through the menus. Now you just hold triangle, flick the stick in a direction, and your weapon is there.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought you would go to the next point.
Oh, okay, you had mentioned you wanted to lead. I can do this.
Okay.
All right. So, 1, 2, 3. So, as I mentioned before about aiming, we'll talk a little bit more about it here. Your head is the aiming reticule. So, this is really cool. If you want to, say, shoot a harpoon, you don't have to aim. You don't aim with the sticks. You're aiming wherever you're looking is what you're going to hit.
Yeah. Where you are looking at will influence the aiming and where you fire. So, thinking back on it now, this is similar to the Res demo that was revealed at PSX, and Greg Miller played it. And normally when you play Res, the camera is sort of fixed behind the character floating through the world as you're shooting things. And if a character passes by you, that's it. You can't get the points from him. But Greg Miller when he was playing, he was like, "Oh, the enemy passed by me," and he watched it pass by, and he realized, "Oh crap! I can still shoot it! Bang bang! Ha! I got him!"
Yeah, it's just a lot easier to aim. I think it's again going to be like the quick suck wheel, where it puts you closer into the game by taking out a lot of the stuff in between you and the game that you're playing.
Yeah, and I think using your head can be a better method of aiming than using an analog stick, because you yourself are directing with your head where the aiming reticule will go. So if you want to quickly shift over to the side to quickly deal with an enemy behind Victor, then you can do that.
Yeah, we have a few points on the creative team itself, but there's one more point here about the actual game. And as I mentioned before, Eternal Darkness on the GameCube, a major factor of that was that sanity meter. Whereas your sanity slipped, the game could screw with you. It could pretend to, it never actually erased your save, but it could pretend that your save was being erased. Or it could turn the volume up and down on your television, or things like that. Insomniac was considering doing that, according to the interview with Game Informer, but they've decided against it. So the horror will be in the game itself. There is no sanity meter. And again, I think that goes right back to the fact that VR is so new that they don't want to overwhelm their player.
Yeah, it feels more like they're not going to mess with the player, they're going to mess with Victor.
Yeah.
Von
Which
Ion.
might... wrong Victor, kebabs, wrong Victor. But that goes back to the fact that the camera might be another character in the game, which is really cool. I really like that idea. I'm crossing my fingers that that's actually true, because if it's not, it's a missed opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that's all we're going to talk about the game itself. If you want to read even more about it, go read the Game Informer article. It's really cool.
Yeah. There is one last point, which is that it is explained that as Victor descends into the alien labyrinth, the hallucinations that he has is of the past, present, and future, and the player will learn of his dark baggage and begin to question what exactly is happening in Antarctica.
I wanted to leave that as a spoiler, but if you want to tell our audience that, you do that.
That's not a spoiler.
Well, I didn't know that before reading the article.
No, the spoiler would be, and the hallucination of the past is that he is actually a robot cyborg sent by Darth Vader to exterminate Indiana Jones.
Also, I'm sure there's going to, 40 years from now, there's going to be a movie that's like that, and we are going to be labeled as terrible, terrible people. I don't know if you saw the Simpsons still from 1996, where they have Alvin and the Chipmunks movie poster right next to episode 7 on a movie lot, opening the same weekend.
Funny.
But anyway, so now we've talked about the Edge of Nowhere actual gameplay elements.
Which we still know surprisingly little about.
This is true. I mean, all we know about is those 2 levels, and some really, really pretty screenshots and a little bit about the way gameplay works.
Yeah, we haven't seen... my biggest curiosity is how exactly the combat will work in terms of... Is your aiming ability going to be limited by where you happen to have Victor pointed? Where is the camera going to be during combat? We don't know.
Yeah, and they say limited ammo, and that also that the ammo is sort of scrounged. So is there a crafting system involved?
God, I hope not.
You don't like crafting systems?
No, crafting is just a way to delay the experience of picking up the item you really want.
This is true.
The only exception that I find is Minecraft, because then at least the component pieces on their own are useful for something else, other than crafting it to make the thing you want.
Yeah, like wood can be used to build a house or to, say, make a pickaxe.
Exactly. I don't like it when you're given, say, frog's eyes and druids' beards, and they're useless until you craft them into... Well, actually, I have no idea what you would craft out of a frog's eyes and druids' beards, but you know what I mean.
Some kind of weird potion.
Yeah, it's useless until you craft it into a thing, and I don't like that style of crafting.
That's true. Well, now I wonder if it were a crafting system that maybe the things on their own are useful, but they're more useful combined. Because say a petrol, one of the weapons they mentioned was a petrol gun, like a petrol bomb. Well, you could have petrol on its own, gasoline that you could just set on fire.
Yeah.
Or you could put it in a canister and then toss it.
It could also be they could have a system similar to what Quest for Booty did with its weapon mods, where instead of having them purchasable from a vendor, they replaced gold bolts. So if you were thorough, you got additional perks to your weapons, and that could add a collectible system to the game that fits within the game universe, because you're just scrounging for whatever you can find.
So you start off with jars of gasoline, and then maybe you can get some like broken glass that you can put in it, so that when you're tossing it and setting on fire, it also shoots shrapnel or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've known enough Mythbusters to know that wouldn't actually work, but I get your point.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, no, shooting glass shrapnel petrol bombs wouldn't actually work, but this is the in-game universe.
Yeah, petrol bombs don't actually have any explosive force. It's just a rapidly expanding fire, and that's it.
But that's still painful.
I know, but there's no shockwave to propel the shrapnel.
This is true.
That's what I mean. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, the last little bits about Edge of Nowhere that are revealed in the Game Informer article are in my opinion scarce but just as important, and they're to do with the actual studio.
Yeah, the sort of
so
the
for those of you
development workings.
Yeah, so if those of you who don't know, Insomniac isn't a single studio, it's two. There's one in Burbank, California, and there's another one in Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah, they are both very tight and interconnected, though. So, for example, when Durham was working on Into the Nexus, Burbank actually sent over some of their animators to help out with the animation of the cutscenes, and you can tell that they did that because the animation is really good.
Yeah, Into the Nexus has excellent animation. For those of you that don't know, Durham did the later 3 Ratchet and Clank games, and actually the PS4 one as well.
Yeah, I am hesitant to call them the Durham trilogy.
Yeah, so they
did
picked
War
up
for One, Full Frontal Assault, and Into the Nexus, and now they're doing the PS4 game and Edge of Nowhere.
which begs the question: is what is Burbank doing?
Yeah, please let it be Sunset Overdrive 2.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers for that. I still need to play the first one.
I do too. I'm waiting for the right moment. If Sunset Overdrive 2 is an Xbox exclusive, then I'll pick up an Xbox One with the first game.
I might as well. At the very least, I can harass some friends, buy the disc myself, and play it at their place. I'm a Sony fanboy, so well, yes, but so the question then is, what is Burbank doing now that we know that Ratchet and Clank and Edge of Nowhere are both being developed in Durham? But the other thing is we were both wondering, why wasn't Brian Allgaier attached to PS4's Ratchet and Clank? And that's because he was creative director of this game here, Edge of Nowhere.
Yeah, he is. For those who don't know, Brian Allgaier was previously the creative director for all 6 PS3 Ratchet and Clank titles. He's sort of this enthusiastic fellow who likes talking about the game, who has a beard. If you've seen most of the behind-the-scenes content for the future saga, you'll remember what he looks like when you see him.
Yeah, so
he's a cool guy.
We were wondering, why wasn't Brian Allgaier's name attached to Ratchet and Clank?
Yeah,
that's kind of weird, and now we know.
Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
Understandable. If you work on the same property 6 times in a row, you kind of want to move on to something different.
I would agree, and this is probably as not Ratchet and Clank as you can get and still be an Insomniac.
I don't know. I think Resistance or Disruptor.
True, but those are still shooters. I mean,
know,
they're still
Edge of Nowhere is also a shooter. I guess it depends on how immersed in the Lovecraftian they get.
That is true, because if they go really Lovecraft, you're not going to be shooting very much. You're going to be dealing more with a very makeshift weapons, flares, that sort of thing, and you're not actually going to be dealing that much damage, just preventing the inevitable. But that's really going to depend on how deep they go.
Yeah.
I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover here.
Yeah, the very last point is that in the Game Informer episode, Algai relates the skepticism on VR to what was said in the 90s with the transition from 2D gameplay to 3D gameplay in terms of, but you lose all of the stuff.
Yeah, and he spends a lot longer talking about that in the article, so if you want to give that a read, go ahead.
Yeah. Do we have our own points to make on that subject?
Well, in my case, I kind of missed the only 2D era. When I started games actually with the first Ratchet and Clank. As I mentioned, it was part of physical therapy for me. So 3D gaming was already a thing, and I played plenty of 2D games when I did, but I just saw it as another option for gaming.
Yeah,
I was
so
never
did I.
around when 2D was the only thing.
Yeah, so did I. I started off playing DOS games back in the mid to late 90s with Jazz Jackrabbit, Commander Keen, that sort of thing, and Pokemon. My first 3D game was Crash Bandicoot, but even though 2D games have been all I played, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a video game, but it's in 3D. Okay, cool. I never had this, they've got the 3D now aspect, because I never actually grew up with the Atari NES or SNES with that legacy, so I didn't know what a big deal it was that a game was in 3D.
Yeah, and because I started games relatively late for someone of my age, it was already in 3D when I picked up my first game. So if I was playing a 2D game, it was because of my choice, not because it was the only thing available.
Yeah. I think VR at the moment is in a similar place. It is effectively in the Atari 2600 era, where it is a cool concept, and there are definitely going to be games made for it. But it's still going to find its feet a little bit. We're basically just going to get normal games in VR. It's going to take a while for it to get to the NES, SNES, PS1 level of sort of gameplay intricacies and taking advantage of the platform that it is.
Yeah, I think it's just going to. I think it's going to be a very competent game, and it's going to be one that understands its limitations, given its medium. But is it going to, say, completely break new ground as far as a VR game goes? It can't, just because the people who are going to be playing this game won't be able to keep up.
Yeah, I think there will eventually be that one VR game that you must play. The challenge is getting to that point, because what I relate this to is 3D in movies, where both it and VR, which are both technically 3D anyway, introduce a new way of experiencing the same medium. The problem is that you already have a very well-established existing medium that is just as good, if not better, because it's existed for, in video games' case, since the 70s, in movies' case, since the turn of the last century. And so people are like, well, why would I go with this new experimental thing that doesn't work? It's a gimmick. And it also means that game developers and movie makers have to adjust to the new way of making games / movies in that format. But they're fighting against 50 to 100 years of existing game / movie history. They have to relearn what they're doing, and I'm not sure if audiences and game players will have the patience for that.
Yeah, it might take an entire generation, as it really did in general, of turning games from that thing a bunch of nerds do to most people play them. I don't know if you know this, but now 51% of both casual and hardcore gamers are women, A. Most gamers are over the age of 25, B.
Because they've been playing since they were 8.
Exactly. But C, that more people in the United States play games than don't.
Yeah, but there was also a survey that I saw, I think it was IGN, which said basically only 10% of people who play games admit that they play games.
Yeah, we're not in stage 3 yet, where it's becoming perfectly widespread. Like, people, like, if you didn't admit you watched movies, you'd be weird.
Yeah.
But there are still people who think admitting they play games makes them weird. I think one more generation, the current people who are in elementary, middle school now, are not going to grow up with that. And that's going to be the problem with VR, is it's going to have to survive an entire generation for it to get to that point. And if it can survive that first generation, it's golden.
Yeah. But our audiences,
willing to wait.
Yeah, are they too fickle to wait that long? Give it a chance when there's already a perfectly well-established and functional way of playing games already that doesn't require you to drop another $200-$300.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is in addition to your existing hardware that you already have, like say your PS4 or your computer, you need another piece of hardware to tie to it.
Yeah. Well, I guess that wraps up the Edge of Nowhere section. Do we have time for that one question, do you think?
I'm gonna call it Tim OC. Why don't we do that later after my roommate sews? Because
okay,
it's 8:20 already here, and I want to give her some time. We spent an hour, and I don't want to overstay my welcome.
All right, well then
we can continue to talk, but I'm going to say cut the recording
for now. I'll wrap up that section properly then.
Okay.
Well, that does it for the Edge of Nowhere section, I guess. We'll move on to a question, and then we'll get out of here. Stop wasting your time.
Yeah, so be right back after this music.
And we're back. We're pretty much in the tail end of the show. We just got a couple of things left to do. We did get one question. Well, not really a question, just a general post directed at us by Julian C. 1991. And he has a couple of points. The first is that the maps from the PS2 games were much better for navigation. I kind of agree on this one, because, as he points out, in the PS2 games, the maps were much simpler.
Yeah, the PS3 games had way too much other stuff going on that wasn't really necessary for reading the map, whereas the PS2 games was just land, water, key items.
Yeah, I did kind of like the extra frills, but they were a little bit distracting.
Yeah, I mean, they were cool. I mean, they acted more like a map would act, but they do make it harder to navigate, and you have to be able to walk that fine line between being visually interesting and being functional.
Yeah, I also think one thing that didn't help is that you can't zoom out as far in the newer maps than you could in the old ones.
I didn't even realize that you could zoom in and out for a very long time, so it never really affected me so much.
Yeah, it did to me. I'm like, no, this feels claustrophobic. Claustrophobic. The next point that Julian talks about is about the secret waterfall, that maybe Ratchet has to retrieve something for, well, he calls him not Grimroth, but we know that his name is Felton Raz, and perhaps it could include a trading sequence, like that one level in Spyro 2, we had to trade items for the professor to try and get his pencil back. That is a cool idea, but I don't think Pokitaru has nearly enough NPCs in it to facilitate that, unless it's the Tiki Lodge, but that means that you just have to keep going to the Tiki Lodge over and over and over again, and that wouldn't really be much fun.
Yeah. I would say, rather than a trading sequence, at most it's going to be 1 to 2 people to pass around. Ratchet and Clank's never been one for long trading sequences. The longest one you have is only a single item, and that's getting the figurine from the plumber to give to Zergo so that you can get was it the Box Basher or the Armor Magnetizer in Going Commando?
It was the Armor Magnetizer.
It was the Armor Magnetizer, and it was one of the 2 optional items.
Yeah. I mean, Pogitaru, of all the places, would probably be the best location for that because it's open world and it's a populated area where civilians are. So that's its only saving grace in that department.
Yeah. So if there's a trade at all, I think if there's a trade at all, definitely Grimroth, maybe Al. Probably not more than that.
Yeah. You mean Felton Raz?
Yes, well, not Grimroth, Felton.
Yeah.
They do look the same. See, this was a thing that I was thinking about after we recorded that episode is, Ratchet makes a big deal about them looking the same.
Yeah.
They're very clearly not twins. What if it is just Grimroth checking up on him?
That would be amusing.
But and Ratchet's just completely oblivious to this. That would be interesting. And Insomniac, if I spoiled something, I'm sorry. I highly doubt that's actually the case.
Because that would just make Ratchet look stupid.
Yeah, this is true. But he is kind of naive in this version. But we'll find out.
I suppose.
Anyway.
And the last question, and this is probably the big one, is do you think the Metal Detector will make a return in this game? I remember sniffing all over Pokitaru's beaches with it, hoping to find something cool.
I'm going to say I hope not, because it was kind of useless.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't really all that helpful, because... Okay.
Can I, and then maybe you comment on anything I've missed?
Yeah, sure.
Alright, the big one was, it doesn't sniff out any actual collectibles. No gold bolts, and obviously there aren't any collectibles beyond that in the first game, but there wasn't even a skill point attached to it, if I remember correctly.
No.
So, I mean, other than getting you infinite money in a very slow drip, because each correct ping was 200 bolts or something along those lines.
A minuscule amount of bolts compared to, say, a stack of crates.
Yeah, it didn't give you enough for the time you spent doing it. There were easier ways to get more money. And you couldn't hold a weapon while you were flailing around with it, so you could get attacked from behind and not even know.
Yeah, not to mention, to find one, you had to keep an eye out for that one icon in the corner of the screen, and then when that happened, you had to dig it out of your gadgets menu, because no idiot would put that on the quick select, and then use it, find the location, twirl around it 5 times, because you're not just in the right spot, and then you get, 50 bolts?
Yeah, 50, 100, if that. It
Yeah.
really wasn't... It was a cool idea executed poorly.
Yeah. Meanwhile, to smash a crate, you jump up, and then you press square, and you bash them.
Yeah, and you still don't lose your actual weapon that's in your quick select, because that's tied to a different button.
Yeah.
Now, if something like this could help you, say, sniff out gold bolts that you were missing, yeah, that would be cool and interesting, but that's not how the metal detector formerly worked.
Yeah,
if that replaces, say, a mapper, that would be actually a cool idea, that your mapper is a gadget instead of just adding markers on your map. That would be interesting.
Yeah, if the bolt payout were bigger, but the problem is that, again, you need the icon telling you that it's there, but there's no way to tell that you are in a metal detector area without that icon, or I guess some visual cue, I suppose. But then if the icon has to pop up, then it's flat out telling you, hey, use this, and that's not very fun or interactive from the player's point of view. That's the game hand-holding them.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess it was useful for some people who really needed bolts and didn't have a weapon that they could use to defeat the enemies in the area. And that was a bigger problem in Ratchet & Clank 1 more so than any of the other ones, because it was using weapons to solve puzzles.
Yeah.
Where you needed certain weapons at certain points of the game, you simply couldn't keep going. But I think with the leveling up system, that's kind of gone at this point.
Yeah. I think it says a lot that Insomniac hasn't ever revisited this idea at all.
Yeah. I think, and as I mentioned, the only way it could possibly work with a modern game is if it's basically a brand new mapper that's interactive. But even then, you're pulling out a gadget that you don't really need or want in the quick select unless it's tied to a specific button that you're never using for anything else. and the PS4 controller has way more buttons than the PS2, it's entirely possible that they could tag certain things that they didn't before to additional buttons, like they did in Into the Nexus.
I suppose. I mean, the only additional button that the PS4 has, I guess, is the touchpad, but then that's going to be used for the map because we lost the select button and it is replaced with share. There really isn't any other buttons we could use unless... Oh, actually, if they bring back the gadget D-pad quick select, it could work. You could just put it in the spot that the Omnisoaker and the time bombs were in, I guess.
Yeah, so we have the D-pad that's an option. The other option is that the touch screen itself is a quick select.
Yeah, we already discussed that.
Yeah. Another option is L3, R3, which weren't used in Ratchet and Clank 1.
They were.
They were used only in, like, for example, they were used in the map to zoom in and out, correct?
No, I believe... Okay, I don't know which way around it was, but one of them brought up the map as an alternative to select, because select can be a bit fidgety to press, and the other threw up all of your HUD so that you could check your bolts, your ammo, and your health.
I didn't know that you could do that all at once. I never actually tried it.
Yeah, that is a function. A very useful one, too. So there really isn't anything left on the controller to use it for, aside from
I was going to say, L2, R2 weren't used in the original Ratchet and Clank, but they're used in the in the future saga as well as the PS4 game, as we've already seen.
And the PS2 games to be used for strafing and activating lock-on.
Yeah, but not in the original game.
I know, but...
But, yeah, everything from going commando forwards.
Yes. So no, I don't think they'll be returning.
Yeah. I mean, the only new button we really have is that touchpad, and that might be used in some interesting ways.
Yeah, but as I said, the touchpad button is pretty much going to be used in place of select, I bet. And giving the Metal Detector its own button that isn't a D-pad would be considered a big deal, because the only other things to really get that are the swing shot with circle and the wrench with square. So the Metal Detector would need to be on par with those two classic sort of well-entrenched gadgets that have become part of the expected formula, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, unless they bring back the D-pad.
Yeah, the closest has probably been the hover boots when you press down.
Yes.
Bracket time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the D-pad in general in a Kraken time, because you had the time bombs, hover boot, Omnisoaker, and...
Yes, but what I meant was in terms of iconic gadgets. I think the hover boots are the only ones that really get close, if not exceed, the wrench and the swing shot.
There's also the Magna boots, but those you never had to equip. Yeah, those you never had to equip. They're automatic.
I actually really liked in Ratchet and Clank 1 and 2... I'm not sure if 3 supported this, but you could equip the grind boots and the charge boots and the gravity boots / magna boots, manually, so that Ratchet would be wearing them even when he's not outright using them, and in the later games they would show up in cutscenes. I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, in 3 I know you can equip the charge boots on your own. Mm-hmm. I remembered in 1, because I was like, he's barefoot, that's gotta be uncomfortable, but then the grind boots look really hard to walk in.
Yeah, they do.
They look like skis sideways.
Well, I guess that does it for Julian's question. In the interim between the break, I actually watched the full, what was it? The Devs Play episode that had Tim Schafer and Ted Price playing Ratchet and Clank 1.
Cool. And so what, anything else pop out at you that we missed?
Yeah, they're playing Ratchet and Clank 1. It's the oldest Ratchet game. We know a lot about it, but there was still some cool information and insights that we learned that I, at least, hadn't heard before.
I know you mentioned to me something about how they and Naughty Dog traded periphery information.
Yeah, they traded engine tech. This is something that I touched on earlier. Ted explained that the Naughty Dog tech is their instancing technology, which allows them to swap and transition between different levels of model and texture detail depending on how far away you were, allowing for Jack and Ratchet's huge detailed worlds. What that meant was that if you have a big world without this instancing thing, what's up, Sarah?
Oh, I don't know if you can read it. This is unfair to Lauren to keep going. I told her like 10, 15 minutes. And I need to go to bed because it's almost midnight.
Okay, we'll just cut that bit out. We'll wrap it up.
We can do that in our next episode.
All right.
I'm tired.
Okay.
All right.
And, well, I guess that's just about it for the show.
Yeah, I think in our next episode we'll be discussing a little bit about the Ted Price and Tim Schafer Ratchet and Clank playthrough, and maybe some other news that pops up between now and then. We're gearing up for the movie and game. That should be coming out first, and then Edge of Nowhere is sometime in 2016 as well.
Yeah, the only episode we have, quote-unquote, planned is that we were hoping to do this sort of Ratchet and Clank Awards, where we celebrate and recognize the greatest aspects of the PS2 and PS3 games.
Yeah, so expect that soon. But between now and then, news...
I'm going to say sometime.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe that could be our pre-launch of the game episode.
Oh, definitely. Not only that, but I know some cool things are probably going to come up between now and the game. But news is kind of light. We'll keep you posted. Oh, one last thing is we now have a actual website.
Oh yes, we do. We have to do the social media plugs now that we're on social media.
Yeah, so we have a YouTube page. Right now we have our in-depth, which is actually up online.
Yeah, episode 10B. We basically deconstruct all of the screenshots and videos that have been released for the game and the movie so far.
Mm-hmm. But our website is lunarobserver.tumblr.com, and you can check out all of our older episodes there, as well as any of our videos. Feel free to submit any news or anything you come across if you're a Tumblr subscriber, and you can... We'll post that up for you to see. Feel free to share with your friends and family, or the people you like, people you hate, and we'll catch you soon, right? You want to say the website one more time?
Yeah, we have 3 websites. We have lunarobserver.tumblr.com. Our YouTube channel is the Lunar Observer Podcast, and our Google Plus channel is also the Lunar Observer Podcast. The is very important, the integral article.
Yes, the is very important. Otherwise, I believe you go to NASA's page. So,
yeah, NASA does actually have a lunar observer that has to do with observing the real-life moon.
Yeah, so on that note, happy holidays to everybody and a healthy new year. And we'll see you in 2016.
A healthy new year? Christmas isn't about carrots. Well, unless it's like Rudolph or something.
I guess. I mean...
Happy
and healthy. And I'm Division 10. And
see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.